Welcome viewers, this is Dex of the Black Pants Legion, and this is an interview. I've spoken with admins, hosts, developers, and other creatives behind Space Station 13 before, and they are notoriously antisocial types who generally don't like to talk with or at people for prolonged periods of time, as they are judge, jury, and executioner on a server and can't be seen demonstrating favoritism. At least that's the theory. Anyways, here's how this works. I'm putting out an open call to any and all Space Station 13 admins on any public listed servers. This call is here, so answer it. If you're interested in answering or participating in an interview about Space Station 13, its history, and your server, please respond. See the description below for an email contact. I'll try to get to you and we can set something up. That being said, this is an interview with the Space Station 13 admin. The questions are largely freeform, and the discussion does not reflect necessarily, God, can I English today, the policy of the server unless otherwise stated by the person I'm interviewing. The reason I say this is I want to encourage an admin to be frank, honest, and open about their experiences without worrying they're shitting on the server, prevent them from being yelled at representing the server community in a bad way. This is a point of view, and not, I repeat, not an absolute definition of fact and doctrine on said server. That being said, this is not a standard interview. I had originally tried to get this interview while this person was an admin, and since then, we've had nothing but bad scheduling, and all sorts of things happen between now and then that we're going to get into. So, please, interviewee, introduce yourself, tell us why you're important to Space Station 13, where you were a admin, and we'll get this rolling.
Well, I am the notorious Feweh. I was the manager of CM for about 2 years and was staff for about 5 months maybe. And arguably I am the person who brought CM from its humble beginnings to where it is today.
So what, tell us about the history of CM, the history of where it came from, how it was developed, who were the people behind it, what made it go from an interesting hobby branch to now what is arguably the most reliably popular server on Beyond?
Well, CM started off as kind of an offshoot of New Eden. It was basically a side server for one of the vanilla SS13 servers. When I joined, it had already branched off into its own independent server. I believe APOP really touched base on how CM started. But from my first experience with CM, it was just beginning. You know, it was at that phase where everything was still using vanilla sprites, graphics, mechanics, and it had really just begun. It was just growing.
So what made it so different? What made it so exciting? How did you craft that experience?
Well, CM, I mean, was definitely unique. I think at the time, SS13 was pretty much looking for a unique server, something different from the vanilla, generic, round-to-round. It was basically craving a shooter, and CM filled that niche from something that was already in the vanilla, which was the aliens itself. So really, I'd say CM just came in at a good time. I think it would either be CM or any other type of shooter server would have come along and would have done well.
So in the history of CM, what made you guys go down this road of aliens lore, down to the point of all the weapons, everything else? This is a fairly obscure, at least was, now that there's so many people who play it, it's a little better traveled, but this was for a long time a fairly obscure small lore world, the aliens' greater expanded lore universe.
Well, when I was there, the lore was very basic. I remember they were pulling from pretty much the movies at the time.
Yeah.
And then as we added more developers and even more staff, and particularly Joshu, who's still actually on the team, was very good at the lore. We started pulling from all other areas. We started pulling from the Predator movies, the Predator comics, all the Alien comics, everything that we possibly could, because really the movies are very restrictive. You know, you're going to run out of factions, you're going to run out of different unique aliens. So you pretty much had to pull from anything you could think of at the time. So that's how really it expanded. It started off very simple, very, I would say, narrow. And then as we wanted to add more content and change the gameplay, we had to start pulling from other areas.
So one more question about Colonial Marines, especially from someone who does play there about once a week. What was with the change of the win rate, the artificial sorts of little changes that went on behind the scene, where there seemed to be slight changes at first, like Marines can't read pill bottles, or Marines can't use C4 because they don't have the training, or what have you. But Why was that instituted, and was it just for the basis to make the aliens a little bit harder to kill?
So this is actually a funny situation. Basically, the reason the win rate for a long time was, I want to say 75-25% in favor of aliens, was actually because the content that we had and the map that we had set up, which was the old ship, the Sulaco, was not made for Marines to win. Basically, there was no end game for Marines. So it was actually very boring for Marines to win the game. And I would say that we kind of twisted it a bit and kept saying that, oh no, we do want the Marines to always lose because it's more fun, but it's also because we had no end game content for the Marines. It was just not fun for Marines to win. So we basically twisted it and started pushing it towards aliens always winning because it was more fun for the aliens to win, to attack the ship, you know, to destroy everyone, and then have the Marines make an epic escape. And then I think from there, it really for a long time just kept playing on it. Then it went into the new ship, and that was a guideline we kept for a while. I do know it's changed now. I believe they've actually started to push towards a 50-50. But I would say that, yeah, it was more fun for aliens to win, but that was also just because we didn't have the end game content to make up for it.
I understand. So what made you volunteer your time as an admin? What made you dig in and say, I want to help shape this, I want to help protect this, I want to be part of this?
I actually never wanted to volunteer. Initially, I started off, I was just a player, and the person who was in charge at the time was SAS operator. He pulled me in as a mentor. Then as I got into the actual staff and playing the server so often, I just got more involved, and I was very blunt about how I thought things should change. And the more time I spent on the staff team, the more I realized that the community was growing, but the staff team and the community guidelines and the server was just not growing properly. So I started pushing towards becoming more and more. And as I got more involved, as I said, I just moved up the ranks, and eventually I was pretty much running the server.
So what was the hardest part about being an admin in that community? Because having played in that community, I know some people get a little, salty regarding their Colonial Marines experience.
I would say it's just so many players. SS-13 is just not made to handle that many players. It's definitely better now, but when we first were large, I mean, I remember when we were making 100 players, and that was a huge deal to us. We really just couldn't handle the volume. The amount of people, the amount of players, the amount of people who just actually wanted to play the game and be involved. The hardest part was just dealing with all these people. And that's why CM for a very long time, people had the opinion that the admins were very cold, very harsh, very, like ban happy. But, that really wasn't the case. It's just when you have so many players, you have to be strict. Just like you have to be strict with the staff. It's just a matter of dealing with what you're served. So,
what would you say, personally, were the greatest challenges you had to face as an administrator on that server?
As an administrator, I mean, I'll speak more as a manager because I never was an admin.
Sure.
As a manager, it was, as I said, dealing with the population. It was dealing with everyone, and it was trying to actually build the community up because the server started off very small, as we said, and then it grew very quickly. But behind the scenes, it was not catching up. So the staff team it wasn't structured properly, and we were basically missing a lot of guidelines, a lot of procedures. Really, it was pretty much a free-for-all before I came in. So I would say the hardest part was really just setting all that in stone. It was making the guidelines, rewriting the rules, setting procedures up. Everything behind the scenes that the player doesn't see had to be created. And that was really the hardest thing, is that, rather than me playing for 2 hours, here I am typing up guidelines and writing rules and having meetings with fellow staff. And that was really the hardest part for me at the beginning.
What do you think is the greatest challenge with Space Station 13, not only from the perspective of Colonial Marines and your experience there, but just as a broader community in a face of games that are, one, trying to emulate it? On one hand, Stationeers and SS3D, long may it rain, but it won't. SS14, Unity Station, which looks promising, but I am very scared of the curse. I mean, what do you think is the greatest challenge for this community?
Exactly that. It's a community. Pretty much you're taking players from all different backgrounds. I mean, you have players who want to light role play, medium role play, and heavy art role play. And then you also have people who just want to shoot things and come in and blow stuff up. And then you also have your dedicated trolls and shit players who are just there to cause problems. SS13 is not a united game. It's not something where the entire community gets behind and supports. It's a community where you kind of just make it happen. And then you pull in all these different players and you just have to make it work. And that is the biggest hurdle, is that the community is not united. So rather than more than often being helpful or being on the same page, you have half the player base on one page, the other quarter on another, and then another quarter on a completely different page. And it just makes it very difficult, I think, for developers and anyone who's volunteering their time to make something for these people. So I would say, to answer your question, the community itself is the biggest issue with SS13.
Just in its size, diversity, and demands.
Right. It's 100% that. It's just a constant struggle dealing with people from all different backgrounds.
So, what was the preferred method in cloning Marines? Because occasionally I would see these special Snowflake characters come through where they would have their own art and background and beautiful hair and all of these other things that made them a unique and wonderful Marine in an uncaring universe of darkness, grimness, and death. What was the preferred method? What was the hand in shaping these people to be another cog in the machine or to dispatch them on the battlefield?
It sounds really rude, but it was just complete beatdown. You know, we just had to beat them down and make them realize that they were special. And it was unfortunate that we had to be so strong-handed with that. But, you know, it's okay to have a few snowflakes here and there. But when half your community starts snowflaking it up and they run around with pink, vibrant hair, which, you know, I actually had pink, vibrant hair on my character originally. It's just too much. You know, it starts affecting the role play. It starts affecting the gameplay. If everyone creates a snowflake character, nothing is going to be fun because everyone's so focused on themselves that they can't look at the bigger picture. And something that I think most of the staff team agreed upon, the developers and even head staff, is that we wanted CM to be a team-based game. And by having snowflakes run around and power game, which is something we can talk about later, it was ruining the experience for everyone without them even realizing.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. Is if you have one or two main characters, that's fine. But when everyone on stage thinks their main character, the narrative is kind of hard to skew.
Right, it's exactly that. And snowflakes, you know, they're just demand attention. They're very needy. When something happens to them, they help instantly. Like, they're the definition of forced role players, where everything revolves around them, and if something goes wrong, they don't like it and they want it fixed. So it's not a type of role player you want. Snowflakes are just the absolute worst, I find.
Well, I find it's kind of like the MMO experience, where you are the great hero who will save the realm, but then you look around and so is everyone else.
Right, yeah, it's exactly that. You know, not everyone can be a badass Marine, shooter, killer. Like, you had to be realistic that this was a team game and that you are just a piece of the puzzle. You know, on SS13, the vanillas, you can be a really badass character. You know, you can be the best engineer, you can be the best doctor, and no one will really care. But on SS13, or sorry, on CM, you can't be the best at everything because you have to be part of the team.
Yeah, and I would say what was cool about CM is you could write 20 pages of backstory, but if you died in the first 5 seconds, it doesn't matter.
Right, and that was a really good point, is that we didn't give a shit about your character at the end of the day. You know, if you died and it was fair, that was it.
Yeah. So what do you think makes a good admin good, based on the perspective you have of having been a manager for a community for so long?
Oh, that's a hard one, because I think you need to have a diverse admin group. You definitely need to have your admins who are going to enforce rules, but you also need to have a couple of admins or even staff who are going to be, you know, who are the nice guys. I will say that you do need to not be biased.
Yeah.
If you are biased and you play favorites, that is a very big issue. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's always going to happen. There's always going to be favorite characters. There's always going to be your favorite role player. It's just, if you're not biased, the community will respect you a lot more. If they can see that you play favorites or that there's a lot of double standards, they're not going to respect you. So I would say, yeah, you need, as an admin and a staff member, you need to be a little bit of both. But at the end of the day, as long as you are fair and equal, and the majority of the community and staff and players can see that, they'll respect you a lot more. And if you have the respect of the players and your fellow staff, you can do things a lot easier.
So, I know on CM, and especially many servers, there was always this issue. It was somewhat of a balance between shitcurity and the Grey Tide. Or on CM, shitter Marines and the overzealous MP department. What's your opinion on how to maintain that balance?
Oh god, man, the MPs on CM.
Yeah.
Just
Oh,
constant.
yeah, I know. You failed to salute 8 times. Time to die.
You know, I'll touch base on this a bit because really I didn't handle a lot of the rules when it came to that. That was definitely APOP's field, but APOP was very heavy-handed when it came to he wanted rules a certain way. And when it came to MPs, it was just a disaster. It was something for a long time that I tried to change, but MPs are just, we're basically for the longest time mildly griefing absolutely everyone, to the point where they would just make up rules and make up reasons to arrest someone. But the problem was is that our rules at the time supported that behavior, and it wasn't something I could change. So to answer your question, I fucking hated it. It was a disaster.
What would you say is the optimal way to do that?
Really, it's exactly what I think Razzle did now, and it's to reduce the rules. For a long time, we needed to reduce the rules, but, you know, once again, APOP was mainly in charge of rules. He didn't want to do that. He didn't want to reduce a lot of the rules. So that's why we had the longest rules, I think, in any SS13 server. But at least when you start letting people handle the situation in-game rather than at a game, it gets resolved a lot easier. You know, like if the MPs can be held accountable for their actions in-game, it's a lot easier than having to rely on a moderator constantly smack them, you know, to get them to actually roleplay or follow the guidelines better.
So do you play on CM or any servers currently?
I actually don't play on CM anymore. I've probably put in 3 hours since I was removed, which is a very big change from when I was on probably every day. Right now, though, I am working on my own server, but that's something we could get into a bit later.
Of course, of course. So do you play any standard Space Station 13 or a variety of servers?
I log on Fallout 13 every so often.
Hopefully not Bad Deathclaw.
Actually, yeah, Bad Deathclaw. You know, it's different. You know, I know it's got the whole ERP thing going on and all that. Avoid it. You know, I've never been a fan of the whole sexualizing SS13 by any means.
Yeah.
I do find it's a very easy scapegoat for servers to just shove in sexual content and then increase their player base. Because, you know, it's a lot of young kids who are interested in that, and I just don't find it right for the type of community to be promoting sexual content.
I understand.
But if you do avoid that on the server, it's genuinely pretty fun.
So, of all the Space Station 13 shenanigans that you've seen, what would you say are the best and worst players you've ever seen, and why? Maybe not traitor, but someone who has certainly taken up an antagonistic role, if not an antag outright. And what would you say is the best, the most glorious moment you saw in Colonial Marines?
Oh god, there's a lot. You know what? People are probably not going to like when I say this, but Bill Carson is notoriously one of the best antagonistic characters possible. And he gets a lot of flack for being a staff puppet, for being the favorite, but that guy literally creates roleplay out of his asshole. I've never seen someone able to roleplay situations so well and constantly create a roleplay environment. And he's roleplayed his character so well since the very beginning of CM. He is in and out constantly the most, I would say, he's constantly plays his character the same way, which it's amazing that it's been going on for 2 years and he still is able to follow through on it. The most amazing moment, there's a lot, honestly. It's very hard to say. I don't have a specific moment that I can think of right now, but I would definitely say that Bill Carson had created some of my most favorite moments. Yeah, just through his roleplay.
Yeah, I've seen some magic of Bill Carson's firsthand, but I've heard a lot more stories, and the community has asked so many times that I've decided, in addition to interviewing admins, I'm going to interview notorious players as I can track them down, and probably one of my first is going to be Bill Carson.
Yeah, he's definitely a guy who knows how to play, so I can't really fault him at that. There are definitely some other players. You know, there's a few notorious ones who would always stand out, you know, for research. There was one guy named Sir on CM. Notoriously, guy power gamed his fucking tits off. But he was a great role player, a great doctor, and a great researcher. You know, and then you also had your very good standard Marines who go in every game, die, and then just keep going. So CM has a diverse amount of people who really do role play their roles well.
What do you think was the best fit for CM in terms of players? I know that mentally, CM players are a little different. People who play CM play CM. They generally don't play anywhere else, and I rarely see any server where someone is willing to wait for 2 or 3 hours to play, checking back every 15 minutes and asking an OOC or dead chat, is this up yet? Is this up yet? I rarely, if ever, see that. But what do you think was somewhat the best sort of player for CM? Why were they? Well, why are they really so unique in that aspect?
Well, I'm actually going to say that there's no specific type of good player for CM. CM has roles for light roleplay and high role. And the reason it says it's medium roleplay is because you take the light role players and the high role players and you kind of combine them into one, and you hope you kind of get a medium roleplay server.
Yeah.
You know, that's the gist of it. Because there's really no technical medium roleplay actual player. So yeah, you needed actually a combination of light role players and high role players. And what you would actually notice a lot on CM is that the people who were the high role players or the heavy role players were the ones who were playing a lot of support roles. They were playing the commander, they were playing the logistics officers, they were playing MPs, really. All those roles that weren't going around shooting everything. But then you also needed those light role players who would just go down and shoot stuff and call for medics. Because without those light role players, those high role players did not have enough people to make up the game. We would just not have enough high role players to make up CM. It was never going to happen.
Oh yeah,
there's just not that many people.
Yeah.
So,
no, I absolutely agree. Because if you look at the high role play servers, there's maybe 20, 30 people on, and that's peak hours. You'd see them, that doesn't work. But if you, I get what you're saying. If you take those 20, 30 people and put them into roles like doctors and officers and bridge crew and the corporate liaison, then that's enough kind of sprinkled around to make it work.
That's exactly it. And CM would not be where it is without a combination of those groups. But that also goes into the whole issue of the community with CM, is that you have a very big conflict when half your population's high roleplay and then the other half is low roleplay. And then there's just constant fighting between what each side wants back and forth.
So what I know that CM had many off-the-wall random weird events, including a lot of just fudging behind the scenes to hit buttons and make things happen for humor's sake. I recall once upon a time being made into a xeno-human hybrid monstrosity and communicated with the aliens with sign language and gang signs. But other infamous moments was when I was a artificial person and not aware that I was an artificial person. And I don't know who's to blame or cheer for that, but that's just from my experience. I know many people have had similar strange off-the-wall things happen in CM. So what was your favorite event and why?
I used to run a lot of events. My favorite events by the end of it were actually the human versus human events. And I think a lot of people can agree with that, is that they had so much fun playing human versus human. CM was actually at a very good point where it had reached a nice balance where guns were not instantly killing you in one hit. You could get medical aid. We added a lot of systems at the time when I was in there that it was still fun if you were shot and you weren't instantly dead. That's versus vanilla SS13 and most other servers that when you get shot by a bullet, your round is basically over unless you get like medical aid.
Or it's TG, and then you laugh.
Right, exactly. But I would say my favorite events were definitely human. But I mean, that's not to say I ran a whole bunch of, you know, one of the last events I ran when I was still on the team was I recreated the events of essentially Alien, the original Alien, but on a larger scale. You put one alien in who's actually one of the more robust players, and you have him go around stalking and killing the crew of like 150. And it creates for a very, very scary and interesting round, I think, because here it is, this giant monster chasing down all these Marines on the ship. So I thought that was a pretty good one. But I mean, once again, it's a matter of opinion. You know, if you die within the first 5 minutes, congratulations. You now hate me and you hate the round.
That's, someone always has to be the first person to die, right?
Exactly.
So what was your least favorite event, ranging from the infamous pizza team ERET to Soviet invasion to Weyland-Yutani mercenaries insisting that someone is property? What would you say is the least favorite event that you can recall?
Oh man, you know what? My least favorite events actually were not anything specific, but it was poorly run events. Something I was trying for a long time was to get the admin team on the same level that I was. Not to toot my own horn or anything and say I was the greatest, but poorly run events just drove me nuts. You know, the laziness and some of them, like, running an event takes a lot of time. You have to rename items, you have to spawn everything in properly, you have to make sure everything runs. And if you don't know what you're doing, you are literally wasting everyone's time. Because if something goes wrong, congratulations, an hour in, that event is no longer any good, and you just wasted everyone's time last hour. But specifically, if I had to name one event that I really hated, I would say the things that were out of lore, as an example. Something that did not fall into the CM universe. Like, you know, I've done it a few times, but adding aliens that had no real connection into the server. Having merchants show up to the ship selling weapons to a military ship. Like, that stuff just drives me nuts because that's just completely vanilla related content. You know, why would a merchant ship come to a giant military ship that has nuclear bombs on it and sell them off?
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Something that's kind of shoehorned in from Paradise or TG or any other server that doesn't fit the theme.
Right, I absolutely hated it, you know, and we did have a lot of them use, so when I did use them, I personally tried to fit in as best as possible.
So, what was your favorite role to play and least favorite role to play, since you said you played a lot of CM for a very long time?
I played a lot of CM at the very beginning. I loved Commander. I played Commander all the time, and I would say the officers at the time, well, they were logistics officers. Unfortunately, though, as I became manager, my time to actually play CM decreased significantly. It became a matter of, do I want to spend an hour playing the game, or do I spend an hour moderating and doing behind-the-scenes stuff? So really, I didn't have much time to play any roles. But when I did play, I often played as an alien, just because it was something that I could just jump into, go die, and then not have to worry about anything. But when you're managing a server, it's very difficult for you to play an actual role in roleplay because you're so busy. You know, you're constantly getting flagged for things. You know, your character cannot stop in the middle of the battlefield because you got to go answer an A help. You know, that was a difficulty for me.
Yeah, and a commander that's a narcolepsy sufferer is probably not the best.
Oh yeah, for sure. Anytime I tried to play commander, I would constantly get distracted and I would have to go SSD.
Yeah, I understand that. So, what would you say is the best answer from an admin standpoint of pressing buttons? How often should an admin press buttons in something as thematically complex as Colonial Marines?
What do you mean by pressing buttons? For managing players, or do you mean
events, pyrotechnics, the fun things?
If you don't know what you're doing, definitely don't touch anything. We stripped away a lot of the shitty buttons that would basically server cause a lot of problems.
Right.
But early on, we had a lot of dangerous ones where you could basically change the air settings and all that, and it was a nightmare. So I'd say CM when I was, a few months ago when I left, it was at an okay place where you could touch any button you want, generally. Okay. But before that, you could potentially just crash the server.
Amusing. Amusing. So what was the most rewarding part and the least rewarding part of being an admin? And
the most rewarding part, this is going to sound pretty ignorant, I would say, but it was actually knowing that the community was running very well. I enjoyed seeing all my efforts and energy, go well. Like you could see that CM was growing for a long time. The player base kept going up, people were interacting. And generally when I did join the server initially, it was very toxic. The player base was very, very toxic. And that's something I cleaned up. And it was just nice to see that it had been growing and growing. But the most negative was definitely, I would say, the politics involved when you run a staff team. When you run a staff team, there's a lot of behind the scenes things going on. You constantly have people conspiring against you, harassing you even, causing problems. It's very difficult when you're running something or you create something to constantly have to watch your back against other people. And I would say that was my least favorite thing about CM was the politics behind everything. I don't have any political game. I suck at it. I didn't want to do politics. I just wanted to say you're an asshole and deal with it. But the politics absolutely ruined SS13 and the drama, arguably.
Well, would you not say that politics and drama are kind of core to every Space Station 13 server? I mean, speaking with TG most recently, I interviewed them about the life and flow of TG, and they said, yeah, there's always a drama bomb, or there's always something big that happens, and somebody leaves, and it turns out to be the end of the world, as the server knows it, and then it changes truly nothing in the end.
There definitely is, and I think it's up to the people who are in charge to really destroy that drama and politics. There's nothing you can do with the politics and drama outside of your server, but on CM, for a very long time, we did a very good job at just not having a lot of drama, not having a lot of politics. Unfortunately, that changed near the end. But it's up to the people, really, who have all the power to stop that bullshit. And that is something that I did heavily focus on, eliminating drama, eliminating bullshit, eliminating toxicity. All that need to go, because that was a huge problem going into CM that I knew about. And I knew about it from other SS13 servers as well. So it's something I tried to go into and eliminate. The funny thing, though, is that when you do try and eliminate toxic behavior and shitty players, is that it actually generates drama. Because rather than these players viewing it as like, okay, this makes sense that I'm getting removed or getting banned, they take it completely differently and start even more drama.
Well, yeah, I find that with Space Station 13, aside from maybe Goon Station, which seems to have a knee-jerk sense of humor reaction when it comes to people trying to generate drama, they just laugh at them and make fart noises, but most stations I've found have a cyclical sense of drama, where there will be one person who's a good or bad person, who is a hero or a antagonist, and that this person becomes the litmus test, the lightning rod. This person becomes the center and focus and test of the server's health and its community and the mouthpiece of everything that's right or wrong, and that they're put on the spot and put on trial, and buried.
I would definitely argue that that was essentially me. I mean, really, for the longest time, the community was either, I think majority of the community really did like me as a manager in the way I ran things, but there was always that small portion of staff and players who were going to dislike me. And when I was removed, it was essentially they had to bury me. Because even up to this point, there are still people who mention me and constantly flag me down, ask me to come back, but it's something that you need to bury.
So you think probably the best bit of move for all this drama and everything is if there is drama and it does center around someone, is just try to bury it and move on for the health of the server and the community.
Exactly. It's as you said, it needs to be focused towards something. If there is going to be drama on the server, it needs to be an individual person. And for a long time, I was, I was the whole, oh, Feweh's gonna ban me, Feweh's terrible, and all that, which was fine, because the server in general was running perfectly well. But once that person's gone, to move on, you need to bury them. And CM, in my opinion, did a very good job of burying me. Not that I liked it, but they really did their best to absolutely bury me.
Do you find yourself thinking about if things had been different, or if I had done X or Y, it would be better or worse?
Yeah, definitely. You look at things in the past and you go, okay, well, if I did this differently, if I just dealt with it a certain way, things would be better.
Right.
But at the same time, as I said, CM ran so well for so long that my time to leave the server was going to come eventually. I knew it was coming personally. So I wouldn't say there's a specific thing that I wish I did differently. Because really, at the end of the day, CM is where it is because of a lot of the things I did. There's always a thing of, oh, I wish I didn't hire this person. Oh, I wish I didn't do this. Oh, I wish instead of doing, saying that, I never said it. But at the end of the day, like, I've always been blunt. I've always been straightforward. And even up to my removal with the whole sexual harassment thing regarding that female player, I don't really regret it. Because at the end of the day, I'm just blunt and I'm straightforward, So it's unfortunate that certain things happen, but they happened.
And you move on as best you can.
Oh, exactly.
So, seeing as that we're now talking about the drama circus that is always part of Space Station 13, if you had a chance to say something, as you do now, to the Space Station 13 community, if they should choose to listen here, what words of wisdom or warning would you pass on?
Ooh, regarding drama, I would definitely say you never know who's going to backstab you. I've been pretty quiet about most of my drama-related issues. Something haven't very much acknowledged was the Reddit alt accounts. And that's simply because for the longest time I was waiting for proof to show the community that this was fabricated and this was bullshit. Unfortunately, a lot of that is stuck behind the political bullshit on CM. So I was never able to get proof, so I just didn't bother acknowledging it.
So you're just, as you said, burying it and leaving it in the past.
Well, I mean, it comes down to it's my word against their word. And I knew I wasn't going to win because they had done such a great job at burying me and making me look like the villain that I was not going to win when it came to the player base. So I didn't say anything for a long time, and I actually asked APOP before he was removed for access to server logs to show my side of the situation. Because I'm not going to name names, but there are individuals on the staff team who do have Reddit alt accounts, and I do have proof of it, and I do have proof that I was most likely framed all sitting on the CM Slack, but they won't give me access to it, which I find very funny because if they had nothing to hide, why would they not give me access to these logs? So unfortunately, I can't prove my innocence, and I can't show the player base that, no, this is bullshit and it was fabricated, simply because the individuals who ran the political backstabbing against me won't give me access. So it's really a no-win situation for me. So it's something that for the months after I didn't acknowledge. I didn't really talk about it. I didn't want to cause shit within the community because, one, the community I built up for so long with all these other staff members, it's not something that I wanted to destroy. I didn't want to go in after and say, oh, fuck this, fuck CM, I'm going to make my own server. I didn't want to do that because I was angry at certain individuals on the staff team, but I was not angry at the community or the server and most of the staff because they were clueless. But I will say that when it does come down to the Reddit alt accounts, I was absolutely framed by individuals on the staff team. And it's sad that the only proof that I have against this is sitting behind closed doors that they won't give me access to. So, I mean, if the community does want answers and does want proof of who else has Reddit alt accounts, you should ask the head staff on CM why they won't give me access to show them this. Because I think they would be very enlightened to it. But moving forward, it's not something I really want to talk about with the whole alt account. Because really, I've moved on. I've buried this bullshit. But I do think that the community has asked me for so long that they probably wanted to know this and why I haven't addressed anything to do with it.
I understand. I understand. You just want to say your piece, and, well, everybody needs that right, that inherent right to express themselves, especially if put to a difficult question.
Exactly, and it's a question I get asked constantly, to the point where I'm just tired of it. So if people want answers, they know how to get them from me.
So, one of the big questions I also have that maybe has equal import is the question I ask all admins and managers, staff, hosts, and even the coders. Even the creator of Space Station 13 was asked this question. Clown or mime?
Definitely clown. Absolutely clown.
Why?
You know, the fact that the clown can communicate and talk, I just find adds so much more than the mime who just can't say anything and stuck with his actions. The clown is just able to, one, be an asshole, and be an asshole verbally. So it's a double whammy versus the mime.
I understand that, and the clown horn and slipping people and everything else kind of adds, I would say, layers to it.
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
Because anyone can push someone down in a hallway, but a clown can do so with humor.
Oh yeah, he can push you down and then he can laugh at you. The mime just walks away.
Fair point. Now, as we've reached more or less the end of the interview, I wanted to ask, since you've moved on and buried things, do you have anything fun coming up? Do you have any new projects, since you are a experienced manager and orchestrator of things?
I actually am, I would say, very loosely working on a project right now, which has slowed down. I am working on a post-apocalyptic server, which is not at all related to Fallout or anything. It's more about the far future of the apocalypse. It's forgetting technology, forgetting everything.
So kind of like Caves of Cud or something like that. You know, a lot of good roguelikes follow that formula.
Right, essentially, if anyone has ever played my tribes, when I did run them on CM, it's something similar to that, except I wanted to add background sense, and it's going to, I hope, be the first open sandbox SS13 server where you could go up to a rock and mine that rock for materials, and then you can turn that material into a stone wall. And ideally, I would like rounds to last 12 hours, so it would be very long term. And there would be like a system for faction joining and being able to join in on players. It's definitely in the works, but yeah, it's a project that's coming along with some old developers on CM actually who are helping me.
That sounds really cool. I think that'd be kind of a unique server type, because I know there's been attempts with Persistent Station, a few other things, to have really long rounds, but inevitably everything stops working. But to have something that's like a little world that can be exploited, built upon, changed, and run by players, allowing them to run all aspects of that, is going to be rather fascinating.
Definitely, and I think SS13 is starving for an open world. An open world server. You know,
right.
Yeah, we have Fallout, but Fallout is more round-based. You know, it's more like, okay, every 2 hours, things over. This I want to almost envision as you see it, you can do it. You know, more or less like, oh, there's a water there, you're hungry, you go fish for food type of thing. And then you join with other people, and it's a teamwork involved. Sure, it's going to almost be no rules. It's going to be one of those, you make up your own rules, you can role play in that. But I think something that's really good about a server that doesn't have a bunch of guns and is more primitive and based on melee is that you're much more likely to role play with someone when you don't have a ranged weapon that can blow someone's head off in 2 seconds, you know, because then you have to put yourself in a combat situation where, yeah, you could get slashed and he could get slashed. So we'll see where it's going, but that's where I'm working.
That does sound fascinating. I think that would be kind of a unique and interesting game type, especially, as you say, if you don't have this huge arsenal of apocalyptic weapons to destroy people with at will by snapping your fingers. You're probably going to talk to them about how to share resources or what have you. It's kind of why I like nations rounds on Space Station 13, when you have to try to cooperate to get everything you need.
Oh, exactly, and that's something I've noticed on my time with playing, is that when players are forced to cooperate, and that means building, managing their inventory, managing items, healing, they're much more likely to roleplay. You know, rather than being told, oh, you have to roleplay, no, you have to give the players a reason to want to roleplay. And that's what I'm aiming for, so we'll see.
All right. Thank you for the interview, sir.
You're welcome, and thank you very much.
Certainly. Certainly.
Land of stolen